All right, anybody that followed along with what I posted this fall, I raced pigeons and did really well. This, folks, my bird Horsepower, had the opportunity to fly in the Flying V and won $10,000. Cut this. All right, folks, so this is going to be an update. We had a ton of questions about what races I was in, how I did, and what that actually looked like. Here's the update. First and foremost, I've got a little spreadsheet that walks through every single bird that we produce. There's a lot of birds. It's a big process of kind of data tracking, and pigeon racing in general is breeding and tracking data. I personally don't have a ton of time in the fall, which is when young birds, which is all I flew, are. And let's even take just a second to break down the two different types of races. So you have club races. Club races involve me personally training and flying birds locally at a club. The birds all fly to the individual lofts, meaning my birds would fly to my house, Bob's birds would fly to Bob's house, and then you track whose bird gets home the fastest by average speed, yards per minute. Then with one loft races, basically I send babies out to a bird, to a handler, would be the term. And the handler then trains everybody's birds, flies everybody's birds, and they all go back to that place. Now, when you have that one loft situation, which is all I flew, when those birds come home, they can't ever fly again because they learned that loft. Make sense? Everything that I've got here then would be a breakdown of the different races that I flew this year and how my individual birds did. I sent 47 birds to races. A good percentage would be approximately 50% of the birds that you send off should make the final race. And if you reach that number, you're doing exceptionally well. Anything on top of that is all gravy. Now, the first race that I flew is the Breeders' Fall Classic. I entered 4 birds, which is the maximum number of birds that you can enter in that. I had 2 birds fly the final race. There's my 50%. And I actually had 1 bird place 5th place and 2nd overall average speed. Average speed meaning over all of the races in the series. Every race has a different series. Could be 3, 4, 5, 6 races. Each one of those races come together for an average overall speed. My bird took 2nd overall, which means it was the 2nd most consistent bird. Really good. The next race that I was in is the Florida Pigeon Derby. That was actually the last race that finished this year. I sent 9 birds to that race and had 6 make the final race. That is way above the 50%. Well, not way above, but it's a good portion above the 50%. 1.5 birds. And 4 of them placed in the top 1,000. That doesn't sound fantastic, but there were 2,549 total birds in the race, which is a lot. So I had 167th place being my top placement and paid out $1,000. The next race that I was in was the Hoosier Classic. That's in Indiana, in case you didn't gather that. That is what they call themselves as the $1 million pigeon race. Yeah, a lot of money, folks. The $1 million race breaks that out. That's total payout in the final. It's actually total payout be over all of the series, the biggest payout being in the final race. I had 8 birds in the Hoosier to begin with, and 4 birds made the final race, so I hit exactly 50% in that one. And of those 4, I had 3 actually finish, which is not bad, placing 167th and 179th out of approximately 1,500 or 1,800 total birds. Again, not great placement, but I did win $1,000 per bird. The next race that I was in is the Longhorn Classic. This was probably my worst return, but one of my top placements. I sent 13 birds to this race. Now, a few of those were replacements. This is a category that falls in if you send young birds out and they end up getting sick or lost or die early enough, there's a cutoff window for this, you can send out replacements. So I ended up sending 13 total birds. Handful of those were replacements, and I only had, I think, 3 make the final race. That's horrible. But I did have a bird on the second drop, meaning the second group of birds that came in, that clocked 51st overall. So that was top 10% with almost 600 birds in the final race. I've been pretty close to that tier of top 10% with a few being in the top 1%. The next race that I was in was the Southern Belle. I sent them 5 birds. This also wasn't great returns. 1 bird made the final race, but that bird did well. It took 12th overall and again won $1,000. My buddy Lou coined me as the $1,000 man, moving into my last race of the year being the Flying D, or the last race to talk about here. That's where the big, fun, exciting stuff came in. I sent the 6 total birds to that race. That's the maximum number of birds that you can send. This one's broken down a little bit different. You have to be, it's like a private club. You have to own a spot, and then you have to fill your spot's number of bird quota. So a few extra rules applied to it, but Paul, the guy that runs the race, does a really good job. I sent 6 birds. All 6 birds made the final race. 100%. That's pretty cool. That comes down to the quality of birds as well as the quality of the handler. Now, in this, I placed 254th. I placed 225th. I placed 338th. I placed 81st and 10th. 10th being the big boy that landed in the second drop. He clocked 10th, winning just over $10,000. I want to show you this bird. All right, guys, come with me here. We get this guy out. We'll take him out where pigeons should be looked at in the broad daylight. All right, here he is. My bird, Horsepower, had the opportunity to fly in the Flying D and won $10,000.
Is that bird gonna come back?
No. I'm totally kidding with you. Here he is, right here. This is my bird from the Flying D. I named him Horsepower because he is out of a bird called the Dark Horse, and he is out of another bird that is line bred on Black Power. So I took the combination, smashed them together, and created Horsepower. Hopefully, he will do well enough to start his own line of winners. And who I have him bred with right now is 51563. I named her Belle. That's the 12th place bird from the Southern Belle race. Now, why are these birds in cages and the others are in the loft? There's a couple different things going on here. First and foremost, there's a process in breeding racing birds called, or breeding pigeons in general, called pumpers and keepers. What I'm utilizing these birds in here for is the keeper category. So basically, you have to time things out right. These birds lay eggs at the same time one of the good pairs in the loft lays eggs. I can switch the eggs onto here, which will allow the birds in the loft to produce a second pair faster. The game here, the name of the game is time. It's a time crunch type of category. You only have a few short months in the spring to get birds shipped off to all the races. So this speeds up the process as well as allows you to get more birds out of your quote-unquote best pairs. So the only reason I have these guys in, which would be one of my top pairs, is because I got them back later. Everybody was already established in the loft, and for me to introduce them to the loft now would cause problems. They would be fighting. There's territory type issues. They've all had time to settle. These guys are going to stay here. Now, we have young babies up here. We have these guys that are laying their second set, so they're going to end up being able to keep a pair. And then down here, these guys are going to actually be keeping their first pair. They were put together at the same time. These should be laying here within 24 hours. It's a very, I said time is important, but it really is that easy to predict. I have a whole spreadsheet that I can just literally punch in numbers, and it is within 12 hours of being accurate. So these are my keeper pairs. These are also birds that I would just consider racing rejects. They produced some babies last year that didn't do anything at all, And what they're doing is growing birds for dog trainers. So if you've followed along, you've bought some of our young homers, these are some of the guys that are producing for you. That's an update on the 2022 racing season, an introduction to my cool new bird, Horsepower, and I will keep you posted on what happens as we are breeding for 23 already and what that racing season is going to look like. I'm the guy with the pink gun. We'll see you in the next video.